Well, the President of Turkey, Recep Erdoğan, has marked the anniversary of the failed military coup against him by telling a national unity rally that he will destroy any traitors. In the last year, more than 150,000 people with suspected links to the attempt have been sacked or suspended from their jobs. 50,000 people remain in detention. Joining me now is Michael Daventry, a Turkish journalist based in London. Welcome to you indeed. Now, of course, there was public support against the coup, and since then we've had the vote to change the constitution and to give the president extra powers. So whatever he's doing, is it fair to say that he still has public opinion behind him?
Oh, well, he has 50% of public opinion behind him, and that's not to be dismissed. And it's important to remember, I mean, I've been following Turkey for a long time, and I've seen how the West's opinion has changed from about Erdoğan from Muslim democrat to Muslim autocrat in the space of a few months. But he's done a lot for his people. He's, improved personal safety. He's increased social security, education. The standard of living for lots of Turks has improved hugely. And that's why 50% of the country still supports him. It's the now question about the other 50%. Well,
there's also the question, isn't there, of how far he wants to change the country from a secular to a religious society, and whether he is, or the Turkish people are prepared to accept the consequences of that, of, for example, that really blocking their entry or possible entry to the European Union.
And I mean, you're absolutely right. The speech that he gave on Sunday morning at 2:30 in the morning, which was a year on from the moment Parliament was bombed, that was without a doubt one of the most religious speeches I've ever seen him delivered. And he's a pious man, so you would say maybe it's characteristic from him, but it was uncharacteristic because Turkey has these very strong secular institutions, and for him to be working against that in such a brazen way shows how confident he feels about it. The fact is that lots of people are very uncomfortable, even within his own party, about how authoritarian and how much power is being concentrated specifically around him rather than the institution of the presidency. That makes it very grave for Turkey's EU membership.
I mean, who does he see his allies as being now? I mean, there's been a long rapprochement with Europe and the Western world by Turkey, but is that now changing?
Yes, it's definitely changing. Now he draws on a constituency of conservative, pious, Anatolian Turks, nationalist Turks. Kurds have largely deserted him, though there are a significant number of Kurds who do still vote for him. And that's the electoral support he needs to get the power that he wants. Beyond that, he can ignore left-wingers, liberals, any other ethnic minorities. He doesn't need their support anymore, which is why when the crowds, as they did on Sunday, started calling for the death penalty, he was able to say, well, as long as Parliament approves it, I'll put my signature at the bottom of that.
And do you think it is a live issue now?
It's absolutely a live issue. The question now is what kind of death penalty they bring back if they decide to go down that path. It's clear it will end EU membership talks if they begin to discuss it. But what they had about a decade and a half ago was the death penalty for things like murder and for desecrating military institutions and for plotting against the state, but also for revealing state secrets. And there are journalists at the moment who have published sensitive stories about Turkey's involvement in Syria. Journalists like them would face the death penalty if the old rules come back. But of course it's all up in the air. The question is, they want to bring it back in some form. It's whether or not the opposition and the outside world will tolerate it.
And who are Erdogan's friends abroad now?
Well, he's very close with Qatar. And he's also relatively close with Donald Trump. He was very supportive during the presidential campaign against Hillary Clinton for Donald Trump to win. But because they've got very similar mindsets, very similar temperaments, the hostility to criticism being one of them. But when it comes to Donald Trump, President Erdoğan has one specific request, which is to extradite the preacher Fethullah Gülen, who he claims was responsible for last year's coup. That doesn't look like it's happening.
No sign the Americans are going to do that.
Not yet. Lots and lots of evidence has gone from Turkey to America, and the Justice Department, so far at least, hasn't even begun the proceedings to extradite him, let alone actually kicking him out.
If he's identifying himself closely with Qatar, as you know, Qatar is currently at war with most of the other Gulf states, so that would mean he doesn't have strong support in the Arab Islamic world?
Well, he likes to portray himself as a mediator for that crisis. One of the demands that Saudi Arabia and Egypt and the others had put on Qatar was to say you've got to close the Turkish military base there, because there's been one there for a couple of years and a few more troops moved there in the last couple of weeks. Erdoğan likes to think of himself as a mediator between Muslim nations, and he's said in interviews he doesn't want Muslim nations to be at war with one another. If it was 5 years ago, 6 years ago, before the Syrian civil war broke out, I'd say yes, he's a perfect person to mediate. But we've seen how he wasn't able to prevent the catastrophe that's happened in Syria. You might say nobody could. But if he couldn't prevent that, how is he going to intervene in this crisis? It remains to be seen.
Now, a big question, as we were saying, 50,000 people in prison, political opponents, mass demonstrations a couple of weeks ago across Turkey. Just how stable do you think Erdoğan is?
Less stable than he ever has been, but the institutions are much more tilted in his favour than they ever have been before. He controls the judiciary, he can control the military, he controls pretty much all of Turkey's media, save for a few opposition newspapers which are on the verge of closing down anyway. So it's very difficult to read this situation. On the one hand, you can say he's never been stronger, but at the other side, he's actually quite weak.
I have to leave it there, Mr. Daventry. Thank you very much indeed. Lots still to come in the next hour of All Out Politics. Stay with us.